Let's take a closer look at the new Darth Vader 4-inch action figure from the Epic Hero series by Hasbro. Varykino, living the Star Wars life. Hello there, and thanks for visiting the Varykino YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be unboxing the new Darth Vader action figure from the Epic Hero series by Hasbro. As you can see, this is a new toy line by Hasbro, and I just want to have a little bit of a chat because it's always exciting when we get a new product line for Star Wars collectors. And when I say Star Wars collectors, I know not every Star Wars collector is going to be enthralled by this new line. We can see they have a very simple articulation, and the detail is not the same as the vintage collection that we all know and love. But I think it's fun to see new packaging styles and just a new direction for collectors. So for me personally, I like seeing different packaging styles. I wanted to pick up a few examples from this product line. You can see I have Ahsoka, Stormtrooper, and Darth Vader, and I also have the deluxe Sabine Wren. So you can clearly see by the deluxe figures that this is really intended for children. We can see that we have large accessories with play features and that sort of playability factor there that is going to be the thing that kids really want to see on the toy shelves. But I really like collecting different packaging styles. I've found, particularly now that I'm a little older, how nostalgic some of those older card art is, looking back at the Saga collection from Attack of the Clones, that bright red from the Phantom Menace. I like having carded examples in my collection. I try not to be a full mint on card collector. That's a dangerous slippery slope for me, but I like having just a few examples of some of my favorite characters on different backing card styles. So when I saw these ones, I thought, you know what? I am an Ahsoka Tano collector. I want an example of Ahsoka on this new backing card style for my collection. And why not? I think the Stormtrooper and Darth Vader look pretty cool too. And to be honest, I want to open these up and see what the figures inside are like. So I have these ones here to open. Today I'm going to be opening up the Darth Vader, and I will open these ones up in subsequent videos. And I have a couple of other action figure examples on hand. Obviously Darth Vader has been made in so many different formats over the years. So I have an example from the vintage collection, and for just comparison's sake, a 6-inch Darth Vader from the Black Series line as well. So it's really interesting to see that for Hasbro's newest sort of children's product line, we are going much more closer to a standard action figure than perhaps they have in the past. We've seen different versions, different things like the old school Galactic Heroes to the slightly more modern Mission Fleet, and a couple of other experimental toy lines that didn't really last very long. I'm thinking of that sort of tube packaging from the Galaxy of Adventures line. It was very short-lived, but yeah, I want to see how these ones stand up. I think they look pretty cool in this packaging, and I think I'm really going to enjoy taking a closer look at each of these in turn. So let's take a closer look at the Darth Vader in particular, because this is the one we're going to be opening up today. So of course, the first thing that really catches my eye is the bright colors. Of course, this is going to be brightly colored for children to grab their attention. We've got a lot of yellow on this particular packaging, a nice clear readable nameplate that says Darth Vader. And what I think is interesting, one particular note is it says here Epic Hero series. If I can get the light off it, it says that this is 4 inches or 10 centimeters in measuring the figure there. So I'm really curious to see how these scale next to what we know is the 3.75-inch scale from the vintage collection line. Are these going to be taller? Are they just using 4-inch as just a little bit more of a easier to read scale for children and not bothering with 3.75-inch, just rounding it up to 4-inch, or are they going to be actually bigger? That's why I wanted to compare it to TVC and a Black Series to see if it really is somewhere in between, or if it's going to fit alongside vintage collection figures. Because to me, there's a part of me that thinks that this is perhaps a gateway collecting line for young collectors and kids, so that when they're a little bit older, they will start collecting the vintage collection once they appreciate the detail and the articulation of the other action figures for adult collectors. For us here in New Zealand, these figures are about half the price of a vintage collection item. So these ones, there's a little bit of a price war at the moment. They seem to be settling around the 18 to 20 New Zealand dollars. For us here in New Zealand, a vintage collection carded figure is generally between $35 to $40. Some particular exclusives like gaming greats and things like that can run a little bit north of 40, but generally speaking, these are about half the price, which is really interesting. We have a plastic 4-inch scale figure on a cardboard backing card. I know that the paint apps are going to be a little less and the articulation's a little less, but it's interesting to see that there is such a big price difference between the two. You know, twice the cost for a vintage collection figure. But yes, taking a further look at the backing card, I really like the art on these ones. It's obviously got an animated style rather than the sort of photo stills that we see on vintage collection cards, but it is a nice rendition of the character there, looming large, very clear and readable there. We can see that this is labeled as 4 and up. Obviously they have to mark the age appropriate item, you know, in the children's section there. Moving on to the back, we have a bit of an image of the action figure here. Just plain and simple, doesn't tell us much about it. We've got a very short blurb of Darth Vader himself. Seduced by the dark side of the Force, Sith Lord Darth Vader led the Empire's eradication of the Jedi Order. And then we have it repeated there in a few different languages. We can see all of the different languages and copyright text there. And we've got that yellow and blue color coming in really strongly for this backing card there. And we can see the yellow and blue is pretty much uniform across the line. I think they look really bright and colorful. So I guess now's the time to get this one off the backing card and get a closer look at the figure inside, and then we'll compare it to some other Darth Vader figures from my collection, because I really want to know all of the deets of this one. So now I have Darth Vader out of the packaging and we can take a closer look at all of the details and as well as his accessory here. So I'm going to take a closer look at the figure first. So of course, one of the main things that's really sticking out to me compared to modern adult collector action figures is the plastic cape. This reminds me of the old sort of Power of the Force 2 Darth Vader with a cape, perhaps a little bit more better sculpted than that one. Rather than the fabric cloaks that we see in the vintage collection line. And of course, like we would expect, it is removable. And it's got a little bit of sort of a rubbery feel to it. It's kind of not completely soft and squishy, but it's definitely a little bit more flexible than some other plastic capes that I've seen. But yes, and I know it's a little bit hard to read because it's all black on black. But there are some details on this that are nice and some that are perhaps a little bit clunky to my eyes. So the shoulder section of the armor looks really nice and clean. We've got some really nice sculpting lines and some pretty tidy paint really. And then when we move down, there is something about this chest box that just looks, it feels like it's made out of a different plastic or something. And just the sculpting on it is really, I don't want to say rough because all the details are there. There's just something about it that's just reading a bit different. We've got one painted element on his belt, which is the silver belt buckle there. We've got his chest box sculpted, but we only have 2 buttons painted, one red, one green. And in terms of his helmet, we've got one painted detail, which you can see we've got a tiny little silver dot there for his nose. The tusks and the different silver accents on the cheeks are not present. Overall, it's not an ugly Vader helmet shape here, but I am going to compare it to a more modern vintage collection to get a real better comparison. Sometimes you can tell straight away if a Vader helmet is off and it just looks weird, and sometimes you got to put it beside something else and go, oh no, I see where it's wrong. But yes, so, and then of course we have a full sculpted plastic skirt that has little bit of a sort of a split in the side. It almost looks like a rip down that side, but we have it here on the other side as well. Well, that one goes all the way up. Okay, that's interesting. That one goes all the way up. This one kind of stops. It almost looks like it's been cut just up the seam line there, and then that one just stops. So that's kind of interesting. I think this might be where they sort of attach it and sort of join it, because it kind of goes all the way around. The belt is all one piece. I think this is where it's been joined on the figure there. We've got a big peg hole in the back to attach his cape. You can see the peg at the top there. So very sort of kid toy friendly there, being able to take that on and off. We can see a little bit of the back of his shoulder armor there. And we don't really have much in the way of painting on the lower half, but then of course Vader doesn't really have anything other than black below his belt. So we can get a sense of the articulation going here. We've got his arms, his legs, and his head will turn side to side. This doesn't feel like a ball joint at all. It just turns side to side. And we can see that his skirt robe sections just hang straight down. This one's got a little bit more flex. But yes, it's going to make it very hard. Not that we really see him seated, though I do have to say that the likelihood of vehicles being added to this line is fairly high. We know that at this point there has been the Mandalorian's N1 Starfighter announced for this particular toy line. So we could see something like a TIE fighter in the future for Darth Vader, though I dare say they will have to make a different version, because this guy is not going to sit down in a vehicle, not with all of this. That's gonna, I mean, I guess if you're really forceful, you can get that to sit down. I don't think I'd really want to do that, but then I know I'm not a sort of 8-year-old kid playing with toys in the backyard here. So overall, the painting and sculpting's not too bad. You know, the painting here is pretty clean. Everything's fitting where it should be. Just a slightly less paint apps than perhaps we would expect. We've got some sort of undersuit sculpting lines here on the sleeves and on his gloves, but it's a little bit softer than perhaps we have seen on other figures. And something that I think is a little bit curious, and I'm not quite sure why, there is like a big peg hole in the back. I know it's a bit dark. It's this big peg hole on the outside of his glove. Now, his gloves don't move, so it's not like a funny articulation point. I'm wondering whether all of the figures are going to have this as some kind of attachment point for big, bulky play accessories. I know the Sabine figure had a gauntlet that sort of had a big extendy sort of vibro knife and her big sort of hollow shield. So perhaps we've got some sort of deluxe toy pieces that are going to design to fit on to all of the figure forearms. It's a little bit of an odd detail there, because the lightsaber is not really going to do anything to this hole here. And in speaking of lightsabers, we know that from the TVC collections, they often have like a little peg or something like that to go into the belt. There is no attachment point here, I guess because kids are going to be a little bit more likely to snap things off in the small little holes. So while we're talking about the lightsaber, to me this is showing up a little bit more pink than I thought it would be. And we've got a simple silver painted hilt. And overall, in terms of scale, this feels very short for a sort of 4-inch figure. Yeah, so pretty much feels like it's all just made out of that same plastic with these details painted silver on the end. It doesn't come apart or anything like that. It's all just sculpted together. And it doesn't have any attachments to Vader himself. So let's go and see how well he's going to hold it. So for his hands, we've got sort of a classic holding lightsaber hilt, sort of C-shaped hand. And then this one is a little bit more of sort of like a force choke, force move hand. We've got his sort of fingers sticking out, but we're going to see how well he's going to hold the saber in this hand. get the feeling the silver paint, it'd be interesting to see how well it would stand up to a repeated play. Okay, so I can just sort of push that in there. Holds that fairly well. It was a little bit tight, but he's certainly going to hold on to it well if you're going to, oh, actually pretty well, really. So if you're going to like lightsaber fight between two characters, that's, if I press against my finger with that, he's still holding on to that. So if you're going to have kids holding these and sort of doing lightsaber fights together, he's going to hold on to that fairly sturdily. I'm going to put his cape back on because Vader just looks weird without his cape. But yes, and get that on under his helmet there. And of course, because we don't have articulation at the knees, he does stand up pretty easily. He's pretty sturdy with his big boots. Stands up there nicely. So overall, I think if you are looking for a gift idea or way to introduce a youngling or Padawan in your family to Star Wars action figures, Star Wars toys, this isn't too bad. Honestly, there's enough there that it's not annoying me in terms of like, you know, some Hasbro product is very stylized. It looks like it's really targeted towards young children. This sort of feels like, particularly if you grew up with, say, Kenner or any of the other sort of older Star Wars action figure lines, this would probably make you fairly nostalgic for that. Obviously, we've got the minimal articulation of the Kenner era, but we've got more details of perhaps the 90s range of figures. So I think this is kind of fun if you're trying to introduce a child or a family member to Star Wars toys and Star Wars collecting, and certainly at a price point that they can play with the toys and not be too worried about them. For us here in New Zealand, $20 is a much more kid-friendly price point for toys than a vintage collection $40 figure. So yeah, overall, a few quirks. The boxes on the belt look a little rough in terms of the sculpting. Not sure why. I think it's because this is like the flexible rubber, but I was kind of hoping that it'd look a little bit cleaner compared to the rest of it. I'm not sure what those peg holes are on the backs of the gloves. They're a little bit of a distraction. Overall, I think the figure would have been much better if they weren't there. Oh, and I didn't test his articulation. I don't think he can do anything above. Can he go all the way around? Yeah, he can just go around. So it's nice and clean at the shoulders there. It's just nice. You just go all the way up. Just sort of classic, old school Kenner posability there. So overall, I think that's pretty fun. And I think kids would probably not even notice some of the things that us adults are going to notice, especially because of our familiarity with some of the more detailed product lines. So I think for kids, this is fun. I think it's just the peg holes on the back of the gloves that's throwing me off. I mean, these are probably going to look perhaps a little bit odd beside your vintage collection figures and things like that, just because of a few of the details. But honestly, I don't think they're the details that kids are going to really pick up on or notice. Overall, I think that that's a pretty fair toy to introduce to kids to Star Wars and Star Wars collecting. So the collector in me really wants to see this next to some other Darth Vader figures. I think that's where the details are really going to stand out. So I'm just going to grab a couple of others and we'll take a closer look. So for the sake of comparison, because this was a 4-inch figure, I kind of wanted to see it alongside some others. So for argument's sake, here is the 6-inch Darth Vader. This one in particular is number 02 from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, one of the ones that I had on hand from a recent unboxing. Here we have the Epic Hero series 4-inch figure. This one is the 3.75 VC 280, the Death Star 2 version from Return of the Jedi, and this one is the Power of the Force 2 figure from the 90s with the muscles and the plastic cape. So we can see that he is much closer in line with 3.75 inch. I just thought for argument's sake, we'll put them all together and take a closer look. Clearly, he's nowhere close. I just thought it was interesting just to see them, but I'm going to adjust the camera angle so we can take a closer look at these three in particular. Here are the three main action figure lines that I thought would be the best to compare. Over here we have the 90s era Power of the Force 2 Darth Vader. This is the new Epic Hero series 4-inch figure, and this one is a recent vintage collection line VC280 from Return of the Jedi. This is the Death Star 2 with the helmet reveal, so there is a small line here because you can take the helmet off to reveal the Anakin face underneath. But I think it's interesting to see these two beside each other because they have a lot of similarities. They are both 5 points of articulation with plastic molded capes. And one of the first things that really strikes me is the lightsaber length. This is the new one, and it has kind of a slightly shorter lightsaber length, especially when you compare it to the one from the 90s. This one has just a very, very long saber. And you can see the saber on mine has gone a bit orange with age. Sorry for that. This one, it's showing a little bit of a contrast there. It is because this one is more orange than it really should be. But we can see this one certainly had the quirks of the era. It has those big muscles. It has sort of an aggressive stance. But when we compare it to modern figures, oh boy, we can really see how much the sculpting has improved over the years, shall we say. The helmet is very small, the figure itself is very short, and just all the sort of quirks and sort of eccentricities of the era are very evident. If we were going to give a child a Darth Vader toy in the modern era, I don't think this one is a bad option at all. It looks so much more like the Vader that we know. We can see now that we have these lined up, this one, based on the green chest box button, this one is going to be an episode 3 or episode 4 Darth Vader, whereas the red and blue buttons of these ones are Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi version. So perhaps they were going with a Kenobi series Vader look here, sort of prequel, or just classic and New Hope. The boxes for these ones don't really specify a movie or live action series on them like we do for other figures. So overall, another thing that really strikes me is that this one does actually have his inner robe or sort of open skirt section and that rubbery sort of plastic. This one doesn't have anything, no fabric, no sculptor components or anything like that. And yeah, there's just something about the stance of this one, the proportions. It's looking so much better than I thought it would, compared to this one. So honestly, this one's winning a few of the comparison checks in terms of action figure sculpts and details, and by golly, that helmet just looks so much better. The face on this one, it just feels wrong, especially when you compare it to the modern ones. So I'm going to put this one off to the side here a little bit because yes, I don't think he is a great example. But we'll get to these two together. So I was interested to see the heights really, because of course we know the modern action figure line, 3.75 inch. This one was noted as being 4 inch, and to my eyes, unless I get the calipers out, they are pretty much the same height. This one does tip a little bit because he has so much more articulation, so it's hard to get him to stand exactly straight, especially with the fabric of his cape playing into his sort of balance there a little bit. But to my eyes, they're pretty much exactly the same height. I thought maybe 4 inches was going to be a bit taller. It was hard to see exactly how tall the figure was because the nameplate covered the bottom of his legs when he was on his backing card. So I was curious to see how tall he was going to be when I got him out of the box. And yeah, in terms of if you've got a kid that's perhaps a little envious of your room full of Star Wars toys, you can give him or her this Darth Vader and it's going to look to the child's eyes pretty much exactly like your much more expensive and perhaps a little bit more collectible vintage collection or vintage figures there. I don't think that's a bad toy to give to a kid. Or perhaps if you are just a modern collector and are just looking for a few Star Wars things to decorate an office space or anything like that, I don't think this is a bad option. Obviously the peg holes on the gloves are a little bit of a losing point there, but honestly, if you've got a space you want to decorate up, perhaps where kids can get into, or perhaps you have pets and you just want to have some action figures on display, this is a great choice. He's nice and sturdy because he doesn't have articulation in his ankles or knees. He stands up very well. The lightsaber is a little bit shorter, and if I put these two side by side, we can see it has that kind of, I don't know, it makes me think of slightly more old school. It's a little thicker in blade than this one. I know they're not directly in comparison there. And this one does look a little bit more redder now that I get the two together. This one is still a darker red compared to this one. So under some lights, it was giving a bit more of a pink tint. When I see them together, it's looking a bit more red. We can see we have a sort of a slender, modern lightsaber blade here. This one is thicker, but honestly, it was more the blade length that I could tell without a direct comparison. Now that I see together, I can see the differences between the lightsabers. And of course, the lightsaber hilt itself doesn't have any of the black painted detailing that the vintage collection does. We can see a little bit of the differences in the helmets now that I have them side on as well. This one is a little bit more sort of, not quite pinched in, but definitely sort of flatter. A little bit more closer to the head. If I get these sort of as side on as I can, like that, we can kind of see the shapes of the helmets together. In fact, in this angle, this one might just be a tiny bit taller. Tried to make them stand up as high as I could there, but yeah, we've got a nice dome shape there and flared out. This one is a harder plastic. Because this is a removable dome, it is a little bit squishy. So that you can fit it down over the face sculpt. So it has a little bit more of that going on there. But I don't think that is affecting the shape of the flare around the helmet top there. It is really interesting to see the two together. And honestly, I think this one does pretty well for what it is. It's not trying to be an adult collector. I do confess I do like seeing the new toys on the shelf, and I am an adult collector. I wanted one for my collection. So, you know, absolutely no shade to collectors that want to add this line to their collection. I am right there with you. And honestly, I think this is such a fun idea if you want to have collectibles that perhaps are, I don't want to say disposable, but perhaps in a more high-risk environment, or perhaps where they'll get sun or something like that. You know, we treat our prized collectibles perhaps a little bit more preciously. We keep them away from sun, away from pets and small children. But sometimes it means that other parts of our lives and our living spaces don't have quite the same number of Star Wars collectibles that perhaps we would love to see. So for me, I like having a few doubles, a few sort of cheaper items to have around the house, just so I can live the Star Wars life and have Star Wars product all around me, rather than having it isolated to one collector's room, all locked away from dust and light and all of that. So I think this is really fun. I do hope the line continues. You know, obviously they're going to start with some main characters. For us here in New Zealand, the figures available in those deluxe figures were Sabine Wren and Paz Vizsla. From the standard figure line, we had Darth Vader, Stormtrooper, Ahsoka Tano, Luke Skywalker, Grogu, and the Mandalorian. So all very well known, very iconic characters that have all appeared in recent live action Disney Plus series. So again, if children and younger fans are growing up with the Disney Plus era of content, particularly the live action series, these are all characters that they are going to be familiar with. We get Luke in the Book of Boba Fett, and of course in The Mandalorian. So we see Grogu, the Mandalorian, Ahsoka in those live action series as well, Sabine and Paz Vizsla, and of course we see Darth Vader in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and he's just so iconic, you've got to put him in a toy line. So yes, I will have some stills to show some of the detail a little bit more closer up. It is hard to really show them close up on a video. They keep wanting to sort of tip over, and I'm trying to be very careful here. And we can see just some of the other sculpting details here. This one obviously has that fabric in a robe. We can see so much more painted details here. He's got his belt boxes, all of the buttons and things like that on his chest box. It looks very, very minimal. When we have a look at the two of them side by side, we can see how much more paint app there is on the chest. And we've got a little bit of sort of different textures. The sculpted robes across the chest on here have a different texture. This is all the same gloss plastic on this one. And of course, if I take the skirt back, we can see the sculpting details here on the pants. We've just got so much more detail going on the vintage collection, as it should, versus this one. But the details are all there, you know, in just a bit more of a simplified form. And yeah, I just think it's cool. I know it's not going to be for everyone, but I think I appreciate when Hasbro is trying to create different product lines for different target audiences and at different price points. Not everyone is fortunate enough to be able to complete their vintage collection line. They are getting a little bit pricier, and there is just a lot of them, you know. We're pushing 300, I think. I'm starting to lose track about what the recent numbers are. Distribution in New Zealand for vintage collection, it can be a bit spotty. So I'm really excited that this one seems to be hitting just about every retailer for us here in New Zealand. So lots of opportunities for fans to grab this one. And it's such a great price point for kids and collectors alike. So there you go. That is my unboxing and comparison review of the new Epic Hero series Darth Vader 4-inch action figure by Hasbro. I think this one is fun. I probably will not be adding this one to my main action figure collection, but I'm going to find a spot on one of my bookshelves around the house for him because I think he looks cool. There we go. I'm happy. He actually looks pretty cool out of the box, I have to say. I'm pleasantly surprised. I was going in there not too sure how much I was going to love it. It was giving me a bit of flashbacks to this era, but I think it's a big improvement, so it's a win for me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll have other Star Wars unboxing videos linked down below if you want to check out more Star Wars unboxings. I'll have the other unboxings from this line available shortly, including the Stormtrooper, Ahsoka Tano, and Sabine Wren. Now that I've opened Darth Vader, I'm very, very keen to check those ones out as well and do a little bit of a comparison to modern figures as well with those. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next video, and as always, may the Force be with you. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, check out our other videos, and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.